Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales, where we are continuing with our Continental series, looking at breeds which came out of Central Europe in the UK over the last half-century. The Beltex breed started out basically as a Texel sheep bred in Belgium. As they have done with cattle and pigs, it was only natural that the Belgians exploited the double muscle gene, breeding only from those with exceptional muscle. The breed first arrived in UK in 1989, and I'm delighted to have as guests this week John Barclay, known to many as Beachy, past chairman of the Beltex Breed Society, and Belgian scientist and breeder Jurgen Depoyt from Dixmude in Belgium. Welcome to the podcast, both of you.
Hello.
Thank you. Hi, Grant.
Jurgen, if I can start with you, double muscle is something that Belgians specialize in. I've got names Roger Hanset and Professor Pascal Leroy as doing some of the early research, and it wasn't just cattle and sheep, but pigs, chickens, and even horses. You work in that sector, I think, Jurgen, so without getting into too much technical detail, can you explain some of the work that was done with these genes and why?
Right. Well, first of all, I'm not a scientist. Let's say I'm in the middle, in between the breeders and the scientists. I'm a practical scientist, let's say. It's not the scientists who made our farm animals so muscled, let's say. It is the breeders. And the scientists came after them and found out how it worked in the genes, let's say. These two professors from the southern part of the country, Pascal Leroy and Roger Hanset, were both professors in the veterinary school down in the south. But you forgot one important name there, and that's Michel Georges. He's a world famous scientist when it comes to molecular genomics, and he's the man who found out which particular mutations cause the double muscling, first of all in the Belgian blue cattle, but also in sheep. I think it's Rambouillet where he found the callipege gene. And in the pigs, that's my profession. My professional job is in the Petran pigs. There they found the IGF2 gene, which is also very important. And they only could find these genes because we fixed them in our native breeds, be it Belgian Blues, Petran, and Beltex sheep.
Okay. As you said, the breeders were looking for the muscle, but you guys picked up the gene and fixed it, and then bred from the extremities of that. And the breed arrived in UK in 1989, and butcher and entrepreneur Tom Ashton, who's been previously on this podcast, had seen them on a farm whilst buying Belgian blue cattle, but it took quite a while to get the imports into the UK due to a few health status problems, I think, and I suspect that was probably made of Wisner. Would that be, Jurgen?
Indeed. Well, father and his flock, together with grandfather, they got rid of MV. I think it was the 1990s. Well, I think the first year after they got the free certificate, they were able to export to the UK, but it wasn't through the Society of Tom Ashton. It was rather the other one from Scotland. You're going to talk later on that, I think.
We'll come on to that one, yes, indeed. And Tom Ashton admitted that he knew very little about sheep, but encouraged by his wife Margaret, he teamed up with Dr. Mike Tempest, and they formed the Beltex partnership, of course, where the breed got its name. And they also formed a partnership with Monsieur Paul Hardy, a Belgian ministry official who helped with those first imports under an umbrella known as Belgiumex. And he was a smart guy, Jurgen. Do you remember him? Were you involved at that stage?
Yes, well, Paul was indeed an official. I think it was in the back end of his career. Maybe he was already a pensioner when he got involved into the Belgiumex cooperative. Again, he's from the southern part of the country, French-speaking. As you know, Belgium has a Dutch-speaking part and a French-speaking part. I'm from the Dutch-speaking part. Well, Paul Hardy being a very good gentleman, I'm sure he got along really well with Tom Ashton, being a gentleman himself. So they teamed up and got it started. Especially in the beginning years, you have to remember it's only 1992 we got the common market. So there were a lot of red tape before 92, let's say, when they started off the Beltex breed and the exports to the United Kingdom. Also, quarantine was necessary. So it wasn't straightforward. And Paul Hardy, being really well connected into the Belgium side, he was really the right man to get it going together with Tom Ashton.
And Tom did admit, because he had experience with importing Belgian blues through the quarantine, that he was the right man to get those imports started. Correct. And I think they managed to get a few flocks tested early on for made of business so that they could meet the UK requirements. And the first sheep came from there. And Tom then took the sheep round to the royal shows, and he had a trade stand at the Royal Highland Show displaying the sheep. And I remember my father was judging the Blue Domains at the Highland Show that year, and on a day when he was bored and before the bars opened, wandered off and found the stand. And I can still see the excitement in his face when he dragged me across there to have a look at those sheep. And within minutes, he'd bought the 2 ewe lambs on the stand to found his Coningswick flock, and one of the very first in the country. And their names were Virginia and Verbena.
I'm really surprised it was not you who dragged your father. Because, well, it shows how keen your father was really as a stockman. Unbelievable, yeah.
I got into Texel sheep pretty much the same year that he got into Beltex sheep, so the two of us ran the flocks side by side, and Texel was always my primary interest, but yeah, I had a foot in both camps. And a few other like-minded individuals got in contact with Belgiumex, such as Mary Dunlop, of course, Dane and Bigger, and John McElraith from Belig. And Belig have been mentioned quite a few times on these recent podcasts with John's father, Geordie, pioneering in other breeds in the UK, including Texels, Charolais, Scimitars, Romanolas. There's a list. So Jock's involvement was no real surprise. But he also teamed up with another entrepreneur in the burly frame of Gavin Shanks. And this might be a tad unfair, but although Big Gav might have been a top man in the Blue Domains, in those early days, I think Belig would be more the stockman and perhaps Gavin the brains and possibly the finance. But together they soon saw a huge opportunity in the breed. And they went on to form the Belgian Beltex Society based in Carlisle with Jock as chairman. And Jock was some man. Beachy, yeah, you'll have known him for a long time. And Gavin as well, tell me.
Yep, absolutely. And two excellent entrepreneurs and excellent stocksmen. And I certainly owe them both a lot for getting me into the breed. Before I ever had Beltexes, I teamed up with John, and I knew John through my father. Father and George were friendly through the Rouges at the time, and the Romanolas as well. And I teamed up with John, and I went to the Welsh show. That was my very first time away with Gavin and John. The year they showed Shogun down there, and I think I showed them. And that's how I got involved, to be quite honest. It all started for going to Belig to a young farmer stock judging and seeing a class of Beltexes, and I was just a wee bit like your father, Andy, at the Highland Show. I was so excited. Come home, told my father I wanted these sheep, and that's how it all started. But,
okay, they were a breed that opened a lot of eyes because they were just something very different. There was a group that got together around Belig. Alan Tom, I think, would be in that group, and they were mainly Scottish people. I think David Brown and Willie Carson from down Killybegs and took the interest into Northern Ireland. And meanwhile, further south, Tom Ashton formed the Beltex Breed Society in Cheshire at his home in 1991 with Helen, his daughter, as the role of secretary. And the first two rams they brought in were called Lothar van Het Korenhoff, I'm not getting the pronunciation right, and Mistral. And Jurgen, did Tom import those? Lothar registered 75 offspring, and I think Mistral was a son of his, was he?
Indeed, Lothar was the main tub and really the founding tub for the Carcass boys. Later on, Dave Garner told me they never had a tub like that again with that Carcass, and a tub which put that through to his offspring also in crossbreeding for the Carcass competitions. So that was the first really star of the Beltex scene, let's say, who helped the breed further. Lothar was actually indeed from at Korenhoff. That's Wilfred Blanchard, but he was sold by a local breeder here, not so far from where we have our flock, a fellow called René Sabba.
to start with, there was some difficult politics, I think, in those early years. It was sort of quite a tetchy time, really. Then my father, I think, was in both societies, and John and Gavin would bring a lot of sheep in from Belgium, which wouldn't be registered in the other society. And
also here, I would like to mention something which isn't mentioned a lot in the official documentation on websites. The Flemish side was there was a cooperative amongst which my father was a member of, and that was called Ovisco, from a veterinarian called Bernard Carton. And that's where John and Gavin, with their society, teamed up, while Tom Ashton rather teamed up with the southern part with Belgimex and Paul Hardy. And in the first years, it was mainly Bernard Carton taking around British trips on a safari for buying tubs and gimmers and whatnot. They did a very good job, I think, in the beginning years.
It wasn't just 2 or 3; they'd come back with an entire float load of 200 or 300, wouldn't they? And
that's right, yeah.
And they'd have a sale originally, I think, in Penrith and start with, and then later went to Carlisle. And obviously, they were bringing a lot of imported sheep in. They gave everybody access to the breed, and them a little bit of money in their pocket, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was once in Belgium with John McElraith, Gavin, and John Hall, and it was Jurgen. It was Josh Hofkins.
Hofkins, correct.
Yeah.
After, I think, Bernard, the veterinarian, he planned to do a sale directly, passing by John McElraith and Gavin Shanks, but that sale was totally boycotted, obviously. And then they went along with Josh Hofkins, which brokered for them then, and that man took over the job of Bernard Carton. That's how it went. And eventually, later on, Gavin Shanks went along with Noel van den Ende, a familiar face on the sales in Carlisle, I'm sure. There you see, things change, the teams change now and then.
As I said earlier on, the politics got a little bit tetchy, and Tom and Margaret would be bringing their own sheep in and having sales on the farm at Lawns in Cheshire, and then eventually moving their sale to Chelford Market, which of course was the main sale point for the Belgian Blues. And a lot of Tom's early customers would be existing Belgian Blue breeders, of course, coming back for a slice of the next great thing. And my father and my brother Nick and myself would also head off on buying sprees maybe a little bit later, Jurgen, which you would organise for us, and we had some fun. And if I remember right, it was you that introduced me to Belgian Trappist beer. That stuff is lethal.
Well, from what I recall, if I go to UK, you have Stella, and it has an alternative name. It's the woman's beater or something like that.
The wife beater.
The wife beater, yes, that's it. But that's only 5% of alcohol. These Belgian Trappists are up to 12%. So to get an idea of what it can do with a man.
It's mental stuff. And we'd buy back then maybe up to 20, 30 gamers at a time, and keep the best ones for the flock and pitch the rest into Carlisle, and came into the country at reasonable money, and it was quite a profitable little job for a while, to be fair. And Gavin and John would take quite a bit of money out of the sheep in those early days, and good for them. And eventually the two societies merged in 1995, and another past Blue Domain breeder, Marion Reid, was chairman, and they set up council, which I think my father was on, and Helen stayed on as secretary of the new British Beltex Society, and assisted by Pat Johnson, and she was very able at that job, wasn't she, Beachy?
She certainly was. They had many years in the job, and put the society where it is today, really, to be honest. Very, very able indeed.
She'd be handling the politics as well as the sheep.
Absolutely.
I'm going to mention a couple of early decisions. One was that the decision was made to keep the tails long on the rams so they could distinguish them from the Texel breed, and that still is the case today, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And that was quite a hard sell for a few years anyway. The breed took a lot of ridicule from the existing Texel breeders, but the carcasses didn't lie, did they? And soon the breed was starting to scoop up the fat stock shows with unprecedented carcass quality. And let's go back and look at a few of those early flocks that we talked about. John and Carol McElraith had a couple of flocks, a couple of prefixes, I think, and Shogun was the first ram I remember, and he was a great show beast, wasn't he, Shogun? He won a lot of silverware.
He did. He won everything that was going on, so he did that. And they marketed a lot of Semenov Shogun after that for a few years.
And Gavin Shanks had been an oppo of ours in the Blue Domain breed, and he was no stranger to the show ring. And again, he became a thorn in our side in a nice way. Such a great gentleman. Him and Alice were great friends of my mum and dad. And an early tup he had was called the Rustler, and we'll go on to speak about him in a minute as well. Another character, Gordon Belcher, he was strong in the commercial cattle show circuit when I was a youngster, and he got into Beltex very early. And I think, again, he bought sheep from you, Jurgen.
Through John and Gavin, he ended up with a particularly good tup. I think he was sold as a shearling in Carlisle. Must have been early 90s. I think his number was 43, 42. Gordon wasn't really a marketing man, so he forgot to give him a name, I think. But he did well, and in local newspaper, Agricultural Press, that was the first up which to hit a good price in Carlisle. I think the exact first show, that was the show winner, actually.
I think it was. I think it was champion, right?
There were a few in the borders, Mary Dunlop at Costain, Alan Jackson at Headland, and a few more down there. And then we'll mention Jock Allen, and Jock was such a strong name in the breed and always had great sheep, but what a character. Him and my father always having bets on, usually involved a bottle of whiskey. And,
That's right, they were two a kind, so they were under the devil.
But he bred Suffolks as well, I think, didn't he? Beachy, great advocate of the breed. You'll have known him well.
He was quite big in the Suffolks in his day, and then he got this absolute passion for the Beltex. He fell in love with them, to be honest, and he brought so much good to the breed. The kind of guy that Jock was, he advertised the breed to everybody because he had so much passion about it, So he did.
And he'd had a bit of history. I think he'd been in the dairy, and then the unfortunate circumstances that he moved out of the dairy farm. And as you said, he took the Beltex to his heart.
That's right. I know he was in a dairy that the Baileys that are in the Beltex. They're in that dairy farm now. But as you say, his son was killed at Ayr Show, unfortunately. And that's when that all came to an end. But Jock got on with it like some man.
And Alan Jackson went on to work closely with Graham Burke of the Pentlands flock for a while, and they put some great sheep out together, I think, because we bought a tup called Headland Dynamic, and I think that might have been the lamb that won the Highland, and I think he was by the Rustler, would that be right? He'd won the Ram Lambs, I think, did he know?
Aye, possibly, aye.
Alan Jackson won the Highland with a tup of ours, I think, Duke of Flanders.
Yes.
Or it might have been the reserve, I don't know. Rustler was a tup. Sold in Carlisle again from us.
Wade McCabe was in the breed early from the Ard Stewart flock, and he's been at the top of the breed pretty much ever since. They're in Donegal in Ireland. Some breeder, Beachy.
Oh, great man, Wade. I go back a long way with Wade. He's been right there for the start, and I've never known him not to breed good sheep. His sheep are amazing, Yeah.
Would always bring his sheep across to the Highland as well.
That's right, aye. And McAllister's too, they brought sheep to the Highland as well.
Willie and Liz, they were pretty able, weren't they?
Very able, aye, very able, and still are to this very day.
My father started with a ram called Ugly Bug from flock 4007. God, he was well named, that sheep. And the Cunningsflick flock did well on some great imported lines, and you guys will know more about that flock than I do. A few other people in those early flocks you mentioned briefly, Jock McMillan from Castle Clary, and he was in there right at the start, I'm sure, an able man and showing sheep from a wheelchair, and just always brought out some great sheep, but just did the job right, always, still does.
Yeah, still does. Top man, still as able as he was then, and so he has. And John Cowan as well in the days he was in early, and brought out a lot of good stuff in his day as well.
Brick Row, yeah, and there was Aberdeenshire boys, Stuart Woods, obviously Bruce Mayer, more renowned for Suffolks and Texels, and Ross and Kirsty Williams got in a bit later, but those guys from Aberdeenshire they're never going to come out soft, are they?
No, not at all, not at all. They were all slightly later on, like.
Sure. And further north, we got Donald Douglas, of course, and he had a top of ours called Brutus, I think, and Alton Copland up in Orkney. And this breed was certainly well represented right across the country, wasn't it? Some
It was so.
good guys.
It was so.
And I need to mention the McLean boys, North Cop, great characters, and Alistair was a copper, wasn't he? And all the sheep had great names like North Cop Arrest and Assault and Crook Nabber, and they had a decent gimmer from us, I think, originally that did well for them. But no, they're just fantastic characters. And Sarah Gibbons again bought a few foundation use from us for the Watmore flock, and then her and Steve are big players nowadays. And Paul Tibbets and Andrew Bishop in the breed, extremely able sheepmen. And Jurgen, your father was a prominent breeder, and I know we bought some sheep from you, as did many others. And who would be the other main flocks in Belgium in those days?
Well, as mentioned already, the breeder of Lothar, Wilfred Blanchard, was really important in the beginning. Obviously, Willy Warbroek and his son now, Geert, very influential. All my life, I've known them on the top up to these years. Then Luke Segert, he didn't export that many, but he's always been at the top of the tree down here in Belgium. Then in the southern part of the country, there was Jacques Louest and Mr. Schwab. They, I think, bred a tub called Valenen Dutroux de Baudet, which was sold by Alan Tom and bought by Freddie Coulter, an important breeder in Northern Ireland early on. That was that sale in 1997, I think, in Carlisle. I remember Joe Callan being the underbidder. He was sitting next beside me and asked me which sheep to buy. I said, you need to buy this sheep. But he went 4,000 and he stopped just under Freddie Coulter. Very unfortunate. Anyway, other breeders then in the east near Germany is Van Esser. At the time, Van Kolen, those were breeders where Gavin and John McElroy imported quite a number of stock. There's a few there.
I remember, I think when I was with you, being on a farm where a man had a concrete bunker in the middle of his field. And they said that was where Hitler had been in there in the First World War. And I remember there were a dozen gimmers they showed.
Luke Callans.
Luke Callans, that's the man.
A veterinary, very special man.
He showed us 10 gimmers and said, these are the ones for sale. And my brother and my father were going through these 10 gimmers. And I walked around the back of this bunker and I found the ones he didn't want to sell. And I said, run those in the shed. And I said, we'll buy the lot. And we took every one of them from him. And they were some cracking sheep. Did us very well, Luke Callan. Okay, Beachy, that runs us around to yourself. And your flock started?
96, Andy, I started with 4 imports from John and 2 from Gavin. Snowballed for there. Following year, purchased Shogun semen for them and started flushing and to get my numbers up. And that's how it all started, Andy.
And the breed were originally untrimmed. And whose decision was it to change that? Can you remember? I know my old man wasn't keen to get the shears out. They were quite happy with them. I was too, quite happy not dressing them at all.
Pretty sure the Belgian Beltex Society from John McElroy and Gavin Shanks decided on they would allow it. Actually, John was a hell of a good presenter and bringing up sheep. And a very good thing, they allowed it to distinguish between the British Texel where you weren't allowed to do that. And that caused a lot of argument in the British Texel from what I heard. And the salesmanship helped the Beltex breed being different. I'm absolutely sure about that. And John McElroy and their society did a good thing, allowing it.
To move on, the first edition of the Beltex Journal was published in 1995, and it incorporated the Irish yearbook as well, and the journal was edited and produced by Ian Kerr, now of the recently CEO of the Limousin Cattle Society and now CEO of the Simmental Cattle Society. In 24 pages, there were 123 breeders listed in the directory, and the front cover featured Showgirl, shearling owned by Willie Carson and bred in Belgium by Jacques Louest. And she was champion at the 1995 Irish National Show and reserve champion in 1996. But meanwhile, Smithfield was the destination for the Fat Lambs, and a name we mentioned, David Gardner, had been rattling the door for a good few years before eventually cleaning up with a superb pair of lambs bred by Jock Allen, and then again with a fantastic, if not somewhat controversial, pair of lambs a year or two later. And along with David and Andrew Bishop, Rob Smith, and a few Texel breeders who jumped the fence, such as Robin Slade and John Hall, the playground got taken over by the Beltex. And Richard and Granville Colgrave from Perth was another hot contender, outbidding the pedigree breeders for crossbred tups to go into the Fat Stock Show with. And we won the Birmingham Prime Stock Show in 2000 with a decent pair of lambs. But these guys just, they had the whole thing to themselves, didn't they, boys?
They were absolute masters at it, Andy. I suppose at the end of the day, these guys put the Beltex on the map for what they could produce. Speaking
to some of the Texel breeders a while back and saying that maybe they took their eye off the ball a little bit on the carcass side of it just at the time when the Beltex came in and lifted a lot of these carcass trophies from them. But let's move on before I get shot. They first had show classes for Beltex at the Royal Welsh Show in 1995, which Shanksy and Balig won, and Beachy, you said you came down to that. I think my old man was in amongst the tickets there as well. And
he was, right.
And yourself and Jack Dunlop used to come down to the Welsh then to give my old man a hand very often, and you'll know better than me. It was a great show of Beltex, wasn't it? And the old man used to get well stuck into it.
Oh, fantastic. Memories that will live with me forever, Andy. When we used to come down and help your mum and dad and then go to the LSA sheep bar for the rest of the day with them. Macallan's whiskey, I always remember it. Macallan's.
He was always up early in the morning, the old man, no matter what he'd had the night before. He'd always be the first one out in parade in the morning. I think he actually won.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So
there was an award there for the shepherd of the show, I think. I think somebody had judged it over a period of the week, sort of people that attended their stock better and best. And despite the drink that he took, he won that award, which I think was probably the best thing he's ever won there, to be fair. But he was keen. So the Beltex appeared at the Highland Show the following year and won again by that pairing with Shogun. And Shogun was a great beast. Let's have a chat about him. What was his breeding there, Jurgen?
It's a tup bred by Josh Hofkins, I think, mainly by his own stock, if I'm not mistaken. He was used a lot in Belgium. A lot of other breeders, I think Rafferin, among which used Shogun. People who were friendly to Josh got a hold of him, actually sold some Gimmers to Gavin Shanks then. So quite a number of stock came along with Shogun even before he was in United Kingdom. I think he was imported as a 2 or 3 shear, Beachy.
Okay.
Yeah, he was. I think a 2 shear.
I think Jock Allen won the Highland Show with one of our sheep, Cunningswick Amalfi, which is son of Ugly Bug. And we'll come on to some of the rams in a minute. Just go to the shows. Wade won Balmoral twice on the bounce in 1996 and 1997 with a female called Ulrika under Robin Slade as the judge, and then Tom Ashton, and she was some stylish beast. I remember her.
I remember her too, Andy.
And eventually the breed got classes at the Royal Show, which again I think we were reserved to at their first year, and this time to a tup called Viagra. And another tup that made his mark on the breed, and there were 47 entries that year. Father went on to win it a year or two later, but we'll chat about these rams in a second. And but within just a few years, the breed numbers had just gone ballistic, and I think the Highlands soon had more entries than the Texels, and it probably still does. There's a couple of hundred of the bloody things.
It does, Andy. We're the last 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 years, we've been 30, 40, 50 sheep more in the section than the Texels. Like the year I judged, 2016, there was 256 entered, I believe.
That's a big entry. Biggest entry of anything in the show, I would think. Beachy, you won the Royal with I'm Your Man. What year was that?
2002. Andy.
Okay. Another import?
Another good flock, Frans Sammels. He was top of the tree. Actually, John Cohen got some breeding of him. It was bred by Frans Sammels, and he brought it in from Northern Ireland, but I forgot his name.
Hamish.
Hamish, yes, exactly, correct. That was bred out of Blood from Frans Samuels, I think. Yeah, a very good top. Right. One of the. He's next beside Viagra, I think. If you look back in the pedigrees on the online flock book, you would find him a lot. Hamish.
Mamie and Robert Patterson were in around then as well, and she's the current president. And Mamie, if you're listening, thanks very much for giving me access to the database, so I've got no excuses to get it all wrong now. And let's then go on to look at some of these other rams that shaped the breed. Registration letters always make it easy to identify the prominent animals, and some of the imports had all sorts of random names, but what letter was A? We think perhaps 1997?
97, Andy, yes.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, and touched on Shogun, who bred a lot of sheep by AI in a huge number of flocks, I think, and we talked about Lothar, and Tom Ashton had a sheep called Superman. You guys remember him?
Yes, I remember him. He was bred by a fellow called Flamand, but he bred tremendously well. Actually, Andy, your father had a Super U from her from that. I remember she was champion in 2000 in the Royal Show, I think, supreme champion, and she was by Superman, wasn't she? Beltex figure, I think, bred by Tom Ashton.
Yep. She was a good beast, right enough. A top we touched on called the Rustler, and he was bred by your father, Jurgen, I think, and he and Viagra were similar breeding. Tell me a bit about him.
Yes, quite a number of good sheep were bred from those lines. Actually, the mother of Rustler was called Von, and I think there was a tub which we later on sold to Gavin Shanks again, and he put him on Carlisle market. He went to 2000 or something, and he think that's not enough. He retained him, and later on, after the Carlisle sale, he was sold to Fergus Harbison, I think, for a fair price. I think 5,000 guineas, and he called him Hutch. So that was a half brother, and then I think Kevin McCarthy came and bought a third important breeding tub from that mother. And the connection with Viagra came through the sires. Viagra was by Tunis. He was bred by a neighbor here. And the sire of Von was a half-brother. That's how it is. And actually, their sire was a tub which is one of the best tubs breeding in Belgium, was Rambo. And he was bred by Willy Warbroek. Yeah, that's how it is. Okay. That's one of the founding tubs, especially for the muscling as well. He put in quite a bit of muscling.
We mentioned Viagra, who was sold by John McElraith for a record price, I think, of £8,000 to Jock Allen as in a syndicate with Mary Dunlop, Dave Stanley, and James and Debbie Milne. And another hard-to-beat top with some record, and he won the Highland and the Royal, I think, Beachy.
That's right, yes, for the partnership that bought him. He won them on the trot, so he did the Highland first and then down to the Royal, won it the same year.
He was a cracking beast. He was close to unbeatable, and we had a tup called Ulysses de Cyprus earlier on, and I think he won a fair share of prizes, but there was another tup later on called Ulysses that I think the McAllisters had, and he bred a lot of sheep, Beachy.
Yes, that's right, he bred a lot of good sheep, and he also won the Highland in 2006, Andy, when your brother Nick judged, so he did.
And Tullygali Elite, he was a two-shear, I think, and it was a time when we were all desperately searching for the Group 1 ARR scrapey genotype sires, and he caused a bit of a stir in Carlisle, I think at 30-odd thousand. Beachy, you were involved in him, were you? Did you get a share?
Yeah, 34,000. It was a two-shear, Andy, and there was myself, Gavin, John McElraith, John Hall, Bob Roberts and Evan Evans from Wales, and we'd agreed the night before in the Pine Grove Hotel that we would go to 20,000 guineas for him, and I was given the task to bid for him, and I just remember getting to 20,000 and stopping, and I had John McElraith nipping one leg, and I had Gavin Shanks nipping the other leg, encouraging me to keep going. And 34,000 he finished.
I think the Aberdeenshire boys were after him as well. I remember that day very well. In fact, the story was that there was 4 of you in the syndicate, and when he got to 20,000, you found 2 more people to get in the syndicate to take him on.
But I think that's probably right, actually.
Aye, good stuff.
But no, it was only Group 1 in the market, I believe. I think, if I remember right, Andy.
Mm-hmm. A tremendous sheep to look at. He was a fair size, a hell of a head. Good muscling. So on top of that, he was very scarce, being the scrapey thing. So that made that price go to the moon.
Absolutely.
It trebled, I think, the previous record price. Anyway, as I said, it caused a bit of a stir.
That's right.
Just going through a few of the top few that I'm going to mention. Neil McQuiston had a top called Stockman. I think they did him very well. I'm not quite sure where he came from. And Cunningswick Gadfly, one of my fathers, he's in the back pedigree of a lot of sheep, including Corstein Whistler, who bred well for the mares at Avermore Flock. And he's also in the back breeding 3 or 4 times of the Aeroland Castro, the record price sheep. A bit later, my father bought Pentland's Hero from Graham Burke in a partnership with Andrew Graham for 6,800. He was a good beast and a record price for a lamb on the day. And I think he was by the Rustler and out of a Turligala ewe who was by Elite, so he got the pedigree behind him as well. And
that was a year after Elite was sold in Carlisle. I sold the top price lamb that day to 3,500, Beachy Hercules, and then Graham come away in at the end of the sale. Absolutely smashed my record that day.
He was right at the end, I remember that. And sadly, he went in a big hole in the ground in Cumbria to foot and mouth, was a shame. I think he did breed a season, but no more. And Beachy, I've gone through a few rams there, but I'll leave you to open floor to any others you want to mention that have shaped the breed and are big influences.
One that influenced my flock too was Bulldozer.
Yes.
You remember him, Jurgen?
Yes, absolutely. I think my father judged that champion above Amir Man in the Welsh show, in the Royal Welsh show in Belfast.
That's right. The year we won the Royal with Amir Man, we took Bulldozer and Amir Man to the Welsh as well, and we were champion with Bulldozer in reserve with Amir Man that year. So that would be 2002. He was influential for me.
You mentioned a breeder in Northern Ireland, Wade McCrabb. He came out with quite a few Carlisle champions selling for good prices as well. And I remember it was Ian Maxwell. If you remember Beachy, he came along, I think, with John McElroy in the early years, and he bought 2 shearling tubs down here, Raf and Ravel, and those were the first tubs used by Wade McCrabb, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the offspring would be Charles or something, which Jock Allen as well bought. I think he won with offspring in Smithfield.
As with all breeds on this podcast, we try to mention some of the females that put a backbone in a lot of these flocks. And can we pick out a few females here that stand out?
The one which stood out in the shows which I seen would have been the ewe which I mentioned before, the daughter of Superman, Beltex figure. I absolutely loved that ewe. I think we tried to swap an ET top lamb from your father, but we never managed to get it. I don't know what happened with it, but a very good top lamb, very muscled. I think you called him Mr. Muscle or something, but we didn't get a hold of him.
The shows tended to be won more by the males than the females, but there were some cracking lines in there amongst some of these breeders that surely still come through today.
I think the ones that I remember the most, going back a bit now, Andy, is the Viagra bred daughters, i.e. Southholm Carla, and then moving into Richard Wood's flock, Kingledor's Pearl and Phoebe. They were all Viagra daughters that have bred some amazing sheep. I would say they are the females that stick out to me. In today's line, I would say maybe one of the most influential females that I can remember at the moment is probably Woody's Rice Crispy. I think she's probably the one that stands out in the female lines at the moment in the kind of modern era. And I think she was second at Highland and then won the Scottish National Show, Andy. But she was sold for 6,800 privately that day at the Scottish National Show, and she's definitely standing out in the breeding lines now. Like, there's a lot of stuff coming back through her. So there is.
As with the Belgian Blues, the embryo transfer had a lot of use in the Belgian breed, and of course, when you do get a sheep like that, they flushed and they very quickly do make their mark on the breed. And the embryo transfer still is important, and as it is in the Texels, so you can get big single purebred top lambs out of scoopy big mule recipients. And Beachy, is this helping the breed commercially, do you think?
It's one of these things, and everybody's at it. Whether it's helping the breed or no, I don't know. I think it's making the pool of tops very similar at sales, but as I say, everybody's at it, and that's just the way it is nowadays.
I don't want to be too controversial, but originally the Beltex breed obviously had a little bit of a reputation for a difficult lambing, and that was an easy way to get out of that by going through the recipient route. But there would still be a lot of Beltex would still be lambed pure and commercially, and with the right feeding, it's still a breed that you can handle.
That's absolutely right. I've just lambed 75 pure ewes, and I'm hand on heart, no word of a lie. This year I have had no cesareans, so it can be done.
It absolutely can. Actually, in Belgium, sheep are marginal, are not very important if you compare it to the United Kingdom. Also, the pedigree job prices are something different. So we cannot afford flushing and AI or whatnot. So it's very traditional. And being honest, well, the breed is in the United Kingdom for 30 years, I think. Well, up to 2000, 2005. The breed has evolved and has become bigger as well, the frame, so wider pelvises, whatnot. We didn't have any cesareans on a 40 ewe flock. I know absolutely sure. There's very few people having problems lambing. Obviously, you need some skill. It is a very muscled breed, but it's been bred very functional as well. Last decade, let's say.
Jurgen, the breed has evolved, as you've said, but you'd carry on coming back over to the UK every year, and obviously you'd find customers for sheep. Are people still going back to Belgium to buy sheep to this day?
Well, I don't know. Beachy has been across once. He's been on the farm once, as he mentioned. But, there's still a few breeders coming for I think, fresh bloodlines, as you say, with AI and flushing being a big job. Bloodlines coming together. Some breeders are convinced you need a little bit of fresh blood now and then. Our sheep might not be as big as they tend to be nowadays in United Kingdom, but we would have a little bit more character and still have very, very muscled tups. So I think there is still exchange quite a bit nowadays.
Okay. I suppose what I'm asking, are there still tops in Belgium that British breeders would still be going over there trying to find?
Yes, I do believe there is, Andy. Yes,
I would think because we don't use these modern techniques, we keep our sheep quite functional. We are very traditional about things. Testicles need to be there, mouths, legs, so a tup not jumping on the head, stuff like that. Yep. They get flown, and with those modern techniques, a less fertile tup not working very perfectly, but a show sheep might be used now and then. I think it is a good compromise, crossing in a little bit of Belgian blood. Why not?
Why not? Indeed. Yep. There you go. Then we'll leave your phone number at the end of this podcast. I can give you a call. And a few breeders, of course, saw it fit to sell crossbred Beltex tups because they do cross and put a good back end on some other breeds, as we know, and they became quite fashionable. And Rob Patterson is an example at Auchinleigh, and he had a huge trade earlier on with some of those Charolais cross Beltex tups. And are they still doing that? Is there still a good market for a first cross Beltex commercial ram?
Oh, there is, Andy. Very much so. In Kelso, there's a ring designated to the crossbreed now, and every year's about 400 and odd in Kelso, and I'm well into it as well. I've got pedigree Suffolks, Charlie's, Blue Domains here and across them all. New to the Beltex and sell the cross tops rather than keeping them. 3 breeds that I mentioned, they're pure, they're all cross to the Beltex, and so they're a big market for them.
And there was a breed called the Millennium Blue, which is the cross with the Blue Domain, which makes a decent breeding ewe. I originally tried that with our original Blue Domain flock, and we wanted to call them the Bluetex. I thought that was a good name, but Millennium Blue they are, and there's a bit of a market for those, Beachy, so you're in that too, are you?
Aye, certainly. I'm Andy. I breed Millennium Blue tops. Just sell at Kelso as well,
And I mentioned earlier on the dressing of the sheep, and this is maybe helped by trimming them back, has helped to keep a bit of a wool on the breed, because unlike the Texel, who are shown natural, some of them are becoming a bit bare-skinned now. So maybe that dressing has helped you guys.
Yep, I believe it probably has, Andy. Although there still is some bare ones kicking about as well. There is, but no, the dressing definitely has helped out.
I think the top elite put in quite a bit of wool as well. From what I hear from a couple of breeders, they are going back to these old lines, especially elite, for improving that on the peelers. I think the peelers might go out of fashion, although the carcass men are really fond of it. Blue-headed, pigmented sheep are quite popular now for a fair years now, I think. As people tend to think they will put a better carcass into their sheep for crossbreeding, and they probably do. But the downside is, especially in the pures, if you don't have hair on your head or wool on your belly, you might get cold in Scotland.
I'm not even going to go into that subject. We'll leave that one be.
So I would definitely, and even in the pures, for showing purposes and whatnot, I like to see a little bit of wool. You can have a tight skin. I'm okay with that, but peeling is a little bit too far. You can have a little bit of peeling above the tail or in the neck, but not on the body. I wouldn't like that.
I agree with you, Jurgen. I'm not a huge fan of the ones that strip along their backs and up their sides.
And Beachy, while you were chairman, you actually put out a message to remind breeders that there were too many people were starting to look for heads rather than carcasses, and that's a familiar story in a lot of breeds. Did you get a bit of stick for that one?
I suppose I did, Andy, but at the time when my chairman's report, it had to be said because there was a lot of people mentioning it to me, especially from other breeds looking in. Listen, don't get me wrong. When I'm judging, I love to see something looking back at me, and I like a good head as much as anybody. But at the end of the day, what I was trying to make everybody aware of at the time was we are the number one carcass breed in Britain, and we were to try and keep it that way, you know.
Absolutely right, Beachy. I'm in with that. Father always said, keep an eye on your bread and butter, and the head comes last. It's the cherry on the cake, let's say. That's the last thing you breed for. But the same for me. We like a good head on a sheep, but you need to get your fundamentals first as a breeder. And what you see with new breeders coming in, especially hobby breeders, they go for the heads and only heads. And they start off with the heads. I think that's not the route to go.
This is somewhere that's going to get me in trouble. I can see this rabbit hole opening up for me. But yes, you're right. I will agree with you. There's been a lot of emphasis on heads in a lot of breeds, and a good beast will make some money. A good head will make 10 times the amount. Moving on before the phones start ringing, the top price lamb, Richard Wood had 27,000 for Kindelaw's Crusader to Wade and Alison McCrabb in 2017, and he was out of a Viagra dam and Beachy, and then another top last year made 45,000. Is that right?
That's right. It was Matthew Burley lamb made from the Mats flock in Northern Ireland, made 45,000 in Carlisle. Sold to Paul Tippett's, with the underbidders actually being sportsmen's.
And the current breed record is 65,000 for Shearling Erlang Castro from Neil and Janet McChryston, paid by Paul and Christine Tippetts. And they'd also set the previous record buying Top Flight Al Pacino for 60,000, and they'd bought the record priced female for 7,800, Cora and Natasha. And Hey, there's some folks say, but they'd sold a record price limousine female as well. So it's able breeders, both of them.
That's right.
Very dedicated.
A few top Texel guys getting into the breed these days. You mentioned Sportsman's, Proctor's as well.
It's good these guys are coming in, putting a bit of money into the breed. The only problem being it might make buying tops harder for us.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think there was a shepherd with Paul and Christine Teppets. A fair big Allet, yes. He has a very good breeding ewe, wouldn't he?
Yes.
I think there's a tub came across back to Belgium from that bloodline. Wade and Alison McCrabb bought a son as well. But I forget the bloodline. Well, he's a very good breeder, actually, Allet. Yeah, a good showman as well. Very able.
So how do we see the breed going forward then? Beachy, a past chairman and obviously still with a lot of your eggs in this basket. Is the breed going in the right direction still?
Oh, absolutely, Andy. The breeds, you only need to look at the market reports. The now trade of Beltex hogs at the moment, like the breed is on fire at the moment. That's basically all I can say. And it's getting bigger, more members and more popular. Absolutely. Good breed to be in.
For the Belgian breeders, I hope with the Brexit now, it's a little bit unclear how the business is going to be between our countries. Actually, I know from Northern Ireland, because they are still into the EU market, for them it's a very problematic situation as well. For EU, for the continent, for Belgian breeders, I hope we can still trade. Actually, we've used 2 British Beltex tubs in our flock and prospered with them. So especially with the breed become that big numbers, far bigger than what we have in Belgium. It would be a pity if we get back to the early days where it becomes very difficult to exchange bloodlines. It would be a very sad thing, I think.
Chaps, it's great to discuss the Beltex breed and its origins, and it's now gone through coming up to 35 years, and I was pleased to be involved with it, and it's great to see the breed going that far forward, and it's fantastic to chat to you fellas. I know you both reasonably well from days gone by, and we've always had a dram together, and let's hope we can get some shows back together and some sheep back out on the circuit, and all get out there and enjoy a dram again. Cheers, fellas. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much. Nice speaking to you.
Thanks for your input.
Been a pleasure. Great.
Okay.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening to our Top Lines and Tails podcast. Please tune in to our Top Lines and Tails Facebook page, where you'll find photographs to back up this episode and our other episodes as well.